The midday heat had given way to a gentle, cool breeze. In the west, the sky had darkened, and a hushed stillness fell over everything, a silent anticipation of the coming rain. The low rumble of thunder could be heard in the distance. Village residents, a mixture of anxiety and relief on their faces, hurried to finish their chores in the yard before the heavens opened up. Only a young woman in the garden, as if oblivious to the change, continued to hoe the potato patch. Her light summer dress was tucked up above her knees, and a scarf covered her wavy blonde hair. She sang a tune to herself, her hoe rising and falling with a steady rhythm. "What are you doing not running home, Mary?" shouted an old neighbor, old George. "Look at the sky, it's so black. There's already lightning over the lake." Just then, a deafening crack and roar filled the air. A fiery bolt of lightning tore across the sky. The old man waved his hand and scurried off towards his home, almost jogging along the thin path between the two gardens. "No matter how long you live, it's still scary when it roars like that," he muttered to himself. Mary froze, cowering with fear, and shut her eyes. Then, with a heavy sigh, she began walking slowly home. The first heavy drops of rain began to fall, then more and more frequently. Streams of water ran down her hair and face, and no one would have guessed that it wasn't just the rain making her face wet. She was crying, and the closer she got to her house, the harder she wept. She paused at the doorstep, took a deep breath, and went inside. The first person to see her was a grumpy-looking woman, clearly a bit tipsy. "Did you manage to weed the potatoes?" she slurred. "Just a bit left," Mary replied curtly. She quickly washed her face and disappeared into her room. After changing her clothes, she lay down on her bed, warming her legs under the blankets. Her eyes closed on their own, and soon she was fast asleep, the thunderstorm outside unable to disturb her. Mary dreamed that she was back with her mum and dad in their beautiful house by the river. She was 5 years old, and her dad was tossing her high into the air. Mary was laughing, and her mum, smiling, was calling out to her dad to be careful. In her mum's hands was a tray with sandwiches, and by the tray stood Snowy, their beloved Samoyed. Then they all jumped into the car, Snowy too, and drove to the city. Everything was a blur of motion, a rush of light and color, and then a voice. "Girl, are you alive? Wake up!" Mary shivered, whether from her dream or another clap of thunder, she didn't know. It had been 10 years since her parents died in a car crash. By a stroke of luck, she had been thrown from the car and survived. But her mum, her dad, and their dog Snowy had died in the explosion. A lorry had crashed into them. Her family had been well off, and Mary was immediately taken in by some loving and caring guardians. However, a month after her parents' funeral, it turned out that all the money from her dad's firm had magically disappeared. Their assets were suddenly seized by the bank for debts, and Mary was no longer wanted by anyone. She ended up in the simplest children's home, all alone. Then Auntie Sophie and Uncle Ben appeared, smiling and stroking her head, telling her they were now one big family. It was only later that Mary understood they were after the benefits given to orphans. As a 7-year-old, she had so longed for a family and some affection, but she never got any of it. All she received was scoldings and lectures. "You're an orphan. You should be grateful to us." When inspectors came to visit, Auntie Sophie and Uncle Ben became the most caring parents in the world. They would dress Mary in their daughter Jessica's best clothes, which had been bought for her. Mary would immediately move into Jessica's bright, spacious room, filled with beautiful toys and a computer. The guardians would tell the inspectors how happy and joyful Mary was in their family. All this was, of course, temporary. Mary would smile and nod because Auntie Sophie had told her that if she dared to make a sound, she would drag her back to the children's home by her hair. And Mary didn't want to go back there. It was even worse. It was better to live in a small room with old furniture that looked more like a cupboard and wear Jessica's hand-me-downs than to endure the bullying from older kids at the home. When Mary grew older, her guardians started to overload her with work. From the age of 10, she was hoeing the garden, cleaning the house and the barn, and helping with chores. Jessica, their own daughter, always tried to hurt and humiliate her. Mary often cried. It had been a year since Jessica had moved to the city for her studies, and Mary thought she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Maybe her guardians would pay her more attention, maybe even love her. But no, they had started drinking and were more and more frequently drunk. Mary would constantly go outside just to avoid seeing them, just like she did this time. "Why are you lazing around, you mare?" Sophie said, peering into the room. "Run to the garden and pull up some radishes." "Auntie Sophie, it's raining outside," Mary replied. "You're not made of sugar. You won't melt," Sophie said. Sophie's stare was so intense that Mary knew not to argue. There had been times when they had laid hands on her, but she endured it all because she was sure that the children's home would be worse. That's why she carried out every order, and even in the rain and thunder, she ran to the garden to pick radishes for her guardian's snack. But then, something extraordinary happened. Sophie's younger brother Gregory, who had just been released from prison, came to visit his sister and took an interest in Mary. Mary had just turned 16 and was a beautiful girl with big blue eyes, wavy blonde hair, and a slender figure. One evening, when Sophie and Ben were blackout drunk, Gregory peered into Mary's room. She was reading a book, and he closed the door and approached her. Mary began to tremble with fear and revulsion when he touched her shoulder with his dirty, tattooed hands. She screamed and fought back. She didn't know how she managed to escape from the room. Gregory ran after her, cursing. In the kitchen, Sophie was mumbling incoherently, while Ben was fast asleep at the table. "Auntie Sophie, help!" Mary cried in desperation. But her guardian just grunted in response and waved her hand as if to say, "Leave me alone." Mary ran out of the house with Gregory right behind her. She stumbled at the gate and fell. The terrifying man loomed over her. Mary squeezed her eyes shut. "Hey you, leave the girl alone." She suddenly heard an unfamiliar male voice. A young man stood on the path beside her, a pellet rifle in his hands. Without a moment's hesitation, he aimed it at Gregory. All right, Gregory muttered. "I was just... He turned and headed back to the house, his shoulders slumped. Mary remained at the gate, crying. "What's wrong with him?" the young man asked. "Is he your father?" "What?" Mary exclaimed. "I don't have parents. I live with guardians, and he's their relative. They're all drunk." "Who are you? I've never seen you here before," she asked. "I just arrived today to visit my grandma. I was out practicing my aim." "On sparrows?" Mary asked disapprovingly, rubbing her bruised knee. "What do you take me for?" The stranger laughed. "On tin cans, of course. Why are you rubbing your knee? Does it hurt?" "Yes, it hurts," she admitted. "Let me take a look. Don't be scared. I'm a future medic. I've already finished my first year of university. Let's see. Button?" "I'm not Button. I'm Mary," she said, offended, but moved her hand away from her knee. "And I'm James." He smiled, then grew serious. "Listen, there's no fracture. But it's a nasty cut. It needs to be disinfected. Is there a first aid kit in the house?" "I'm not going in there," Mary said quickly. "I'd rather spend the night on the street." James nodded in agreement. The man who was still watching them from the window made him feel uneasy too. He offered to take her to his grandmother's house, the one with the green shutters. "So your grandma is old Mrs. Thompson?" Mary asked in surprise. "Why haven't you visited before?" "My parents and I have been traveling abroad for the last 10 years, he said. My dad's a diplomat, so we've lived in Asia and Europe. And 1 year, we even lived in Africa. Can you believe that?" "Africa sounds interesting." "Everywhere's interesting, and you can live anywhere. But I've realized that there's nothing better than our own country. My mum and dad, of course, want me to go to university in London, but I chose a British university, and I don't regret it at all." By the time they reached James's grandmother's house, Mary was limping. Old Mrs. Thompson, seeing Mary's leg, threw up her hands. "You poor girl! How did you hurt your leg so badly?" Mary just winced, and Mrs. Thompson ran to the kitchen. The sound of clinking cups and the kettle whistling on the stove could be heard. It felt good here. Mary felt as if she was wrapped in the quiet, friendly atmosphere of the house. It was so cozy, bright, and peaceful. "Come on, kids, let's have some tea," Mrs. Thompson called out. And there they were, the three of them sitting at the table, drinking tea and eating apple pie. Mrs. Thompson was telling stories and smiling. James was also chatting away. Could it really be like this, Mary thought? Could you really just sit and talk and no one would scream at you? It was a little bit strange for Mary. At one point, Mrs. Thompson changed the subject. "Now, we need to think about what to do with you." "I don't know what to do with myself," Mary said bitterly. "But I'm not going home. Don't worry. I'll leave now and sleep on a bench, and in the morning I'll go to the local council. It's better they take me back to the children's home than for me to live like I have all these years." Mary started crying. Mrs. Thompson put her arms around the girl's shoulders and stroked her to comfort her. There, darling, don't cry," she said. "You're not sleeping on any bench. You can sleep in the living room. And you're right about the home. It's high time we put Sophie and Ben in their place. They've been tormenting that girl for years." "How do you know?" Mary asked in surprise. She had never complained to anyone. "We all know everything about each other in this village," Mrs. Thompson replied. "People know about each other's business but don't get involved. But now it's different. That Gregory fellow seems to have settled here. There will be no life for you, Mary. Go to the council. You should also report him to the police. But I don't recommend getting involved with a criminal. Let them be, and you'll be fine in the children's home." "Who told you it was a bad place? As far as I know, children get a lot of attention there nowadays." "I was there, I know," Mary sobbed. "That was a long time ago. Everything's different now, and you're grown up. You can stand up for yourself." Mrs. Thompson calmed her down, pouring her more tea. It was a delicious herbal tea with thyme and freshly made strawberry jam. James told interesting stories and jokes. It was so nice to listen to him, and he had such a smile that Mary's cheeks flushed, and she didn't even know why. Mary was slowly coming to herself, and her knee no longer hurt. She was right. Why was she so worried? Other people live in children's homes after all. The moon was already shining brightly outside when everyone finally went to sleep in Mrs. Thompson's house. Mary, buried in a soft, large feather pillow, wondered what tomorrow would bring. Would her life really change? In the morning, she and James went to the council on a public bus. The bus drove past her guardian's house just as a flustered and frantic Sophie ran out of the gate. "They won't hurt you anymore," James said, sensing her fear. He gently touched Mary's hand. "I'm with you, Button." At first, Mary was offended by the nickname, but now she was happy to hear it. It sounded so caring. After all, James was the first person in many years who truly cared about her. "I won't leave you now," he said as they approached the council building. "I'll find out where they send you and I'll visit you." "Do you think they won't give me back to my guardians?" Mary asked with fear. "I'm sure," he said. "I'll tell them everything I saw yesterday. I'll even threaten to go to the police if they try to return you to them. Let them figure that one out." Of course, they didn't return Mary. The head of the council turned red with anger when she heard her story. She then called the social worker who was in charge of the foster family and reprimanded her without Mary present, although her threats to fire the negligent worker could be heard in the hallway. It turned out the girl had been living in constant stress all these years, and no one had done anything about it. Sophie was also summoned to the council, but Mary didn't see her again. She was already in a new home, and so, at 16, a new chapter began in her life. Mary was wrong to think she would be bullied here. It was a decent children's home, a 2-story stone building on the outskirts of the city. It became a new home for the unhappy girl. For Mary, who had lived in this city until she was 5 and then was ripped from it, everything seemed new and strange. She listened to the city noises and looked at the streetlights that shone into the windows of her new room. Yes, a new life was beginning. 3 girls lived with Mary in her room: Lena, Kate, and Polly. Mary became especially close with the plump, red-haired Polly. She was also 16 and had spent most of her life in a children's home. "My own mum gave me up," Polly said calmly. "How could she? She brought me here herself." "Well, she was an alcoholic," Polly explained. "And your parents, do they drink too?" "No, they died," Mary said. "And I don't have any relatives at all." "Oh, I'm sorry." Polly spoke of how having alcoholic parents was a terrible thing, but at least they were alive. To be all alone in the world, she said, was terribly difficult. "I have a friend," Mary confessed to her one day and told her all about James. True to his word, James had visited her several times after she was sent to the children's home. Once, he even brought her some pasties that his grandma had made. He also treated her to chocolates. Mary was embarrassed and tried to refuse, but James insisted. "Take it and eat it," he said. "I'm responsible for you now, Button." Mary would just blush in response. Button. Mary loved it when he called her that. James had become her friend, and even more. He was constantly on her mind, but she didn't tell anyone, not even Polly. She was secretly and irrevocably in love with James. Polly noticed how Mary's face lit up when her friend was mentioned. "Oh, Mary, don't tell me you've fallen for that posh boy," she smiled cunningly. "You glow when he comes to visit." "No, I haven't," Mary insisted. "You just don't know the kind of people he is. People like your James like to act all nice, but they're not. You should keep your distance from him." "You sound like an old woman," Mary said. "Maybe I do," Polly replied. "I haven't had much experience, but I remember how my mum got into a mess with a rich man and ended up divorcing my dad. The rich guy used her and then left." "James is different," Mary said with certainty. Polly just laughed. Then James disappeared. He didn't visit or write. Mary was very worried. She wondered if something had happened. But Polly told her, "Forget it. I told you it was a waste of time. It's good he's gone now." Time flew by at the children's home, and soon Mary was a graduate. She was moving to a dormitory to study at a fashion design school. Hello, adult life, she thought. She and Polly lived close by and studied together. After classes, the friends would hurry back to the dormitory, and sometimes they would walk in the park. One day, while walking, Mary heard a familiar voice. "Button." She turned around and saw James hurrying towards her. Over the last year, he had grown up and matured. Seeing him, Mary was stunned. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had thought all her feelings for him were in the past, but no. As soon as he appeared, her heart sang. "James!" she cried happily. "This is amazing. Where have you been all year?" Mary, without thinking, threw her arms around his neck. James was just as happy to see her. He laughed and hugged her, then kissed her on the cheek. Mary blushed and looked down. "I came to see you a year ago before I left," he said. "You were in class. Polly told me you were in the square in front of the children's home, so I gave her a letter to give you." Mary stared at her friend in confusion, who had been listening to them the whole time. Polly looked a little embarrassed, but she quickly recovered. She said that she had left the letter on a bench, and some little kids had grabbed it and torn it up. She didn't want to upset Mary. "Polly, you should have told me anyway," Mary said. She sighed. "I'll talk to you later. Tell me, what was in that letter?" "I told you that I had to leave in a hurry. My mum had an accident abroad. She broke her leg and refused to come back here. It was a complicated fracture, and the doctor said it would take several months to heal. My dad was always at work, and my mum was at a loss. She didn't know how she was going to be alone all day. She had a housekeeper and a nurse, but she wanted company. So she became difficult. Well, she's my mum, so I had to take a gap year and fly to London. Today I'm back, and I came straight to you, Button. I missed you." "I missed you too," Mary whispered softly. They looked at each other, and their lips met. It was their first real kiss. They spent the entire evening walking in the park, sitting on a bench, driving around the city in James's car, and kissing. They realized that no one else in the world mattered but them. It was true love. Later that night, Mary returned to her dormitory with a huge bouquet of roses. Polly saw her in the hallway and scoffed. "Why did you hide that letter from me?" Mary demanded. "Go to hell," Polly replied angrily. "I don't have to explain anything to you. Your James came back, so be happy. You'll see, though. He'll leave you anyway." "Are you jealous of me?" Mary laughed. "Is that why you're being so nasty?" "I have nothing to be jealous of," Polly snapped. She pushed Mary and went into her room, slamming the door. Before she went in, she turned around and shouted spitefully, "You think you're better than me just because rich boys fall for you? He's using you, and he'll definitely leave you." Mary was a little stunned. All this time, she had considered Polly a true friend, and now her real character had been revealed. All she felt was anger, envy, and some kind of resentment. What was Mary to blame for? Was it her fault she loved him and was loved in return? Mary was hurt by her friend's betrayal, but she decided not to think about it anymore. Polly had made her choice. If she didn't want to be friends, so be it. But as time went on, it was clear that Polly wasn't a friend at all. James became the most important person in Mary's life. After classes, she would wait impatiently for him. James had caught up on his studies and had to work hard at university, so he couldn't visit Mary as often as he liked. But every meeting was filled with such emotion and feeling that her head spun with happiness. She wanted to shout it from the rooftops. One day, the lovers were walking along the waterfront, and they saw a ride that launched people 7 stories high. "Oh, how awful," Mary gasped when she saw a brave person fly like a bird. "What's awful about it?" James laughed. "It's amazing. Let's try it. Just imagine you're flying freely, and the whole world is at your feet, and you can shout your dearest wish for everyone to hear." "No way, I'm scared." "Well, I'm not," James said with a mischievous smile. "I'm going to jump and shout for the whole world to hear that I love you." "James, don't," Mary pleaded. "I already know that. But I want everyone to hear," he said, and ran towards the ride. Mary tried to talk him out of it, but James just laughed, and then he was flying high. "Mary, I love you," his voice boomed over the waterfront. All the passers-by stopped and looked at the boy and the girl who was staring up at him with bated breath. "Ah, to be young," the elderly people sighed. "They have their whole lives ahead of them." The young women looked at Mary with a bit of envy. What a wonderful guy to have. Not everyone is brave enough to shout about their feelings for the whole world to hear. Once he was back down, James gave Mary a long, passionate kiss. It seemed their happiness would be endless. How could it not be when it was true love? 3 months later, for Christmas, James was eager to introduce Mary to his parents. They had just returned to England and were at their mansion. He thought it was time for them to meet the person who had captured his heart. The thought that Mary was not of his social status never crossed his mind. What were boundaries anyway, especially when he felt he had found his one and only? He never imagined that his parents wouldn't accept her. They had always supported him and were his rock. As for Mary, when she heard about his decision, she was terrified. How would his parents react to her? His dad was a diplomat, and his mum was a stylish, beautiful woman. She had seen them in photos. What if they didn't like her? An orphan. "Don't be silly," James reassured her. "My parents are the most wonderful people in the world. Everything will be fine, you'll see. At first, they'll be surprised, but then they'll understand." "But what if they don't?" Mary asked in fear. "If they don't, it won't change anything. We'll still be together." On a winter evening, James brought Mary to his parents' mansion. As soon as she got out of the car, she froze. How much this house reminded her of the one she had lived in so many years ago. Her childhood memories were a bit blurred, but Mary clearly remembered their beautiful 2-story cottage with its huge windows, balcony, and tiled roof. This was a different house, but something about it was the same. It also had an air of prosperity and luxury. As they walked along the path to the porch, her heart pounded. The trees and bushes were just like hers had been. "Do you have roses here in the summer?" she asked James, full of excitement. He nodded and pointed to the snowy flower bed. "We had those too," Mary said sadly. "Don't be sad, Button," James said with a wink. "We'll come here often now." Mary didn't answer. She just sighed. She hoped they would. Sarah and Robert knew their son was coming with a girl that evening. They were even happy about it. If their son was introducing them to her, it must be serious. And they didn't doubt his choice. He was a smart boy. "What a conspirator our son is," Sarah laughed, waiting for her son and their guest. "It turns out he's been dating this girl for several months, and they were good friends for a few years before that." "Yes, James told me that too," Robert nodded. "I just didn't understand who she was. He was so vague about it that I didn't understand either," Sarah said, shrugging her shoulders. "He only said that his chosen one was a very nice girl, and that we would definitely like her. I think it's Jane." "Jane, don't you remember? Jane is the banker Matthew's daughter. They live 2 blocks away from us. I remember that girl running around." "Then she went somewhere." "Well, she's studying in London. She'll finish her studies in a couple of years. Listen, that's great. And James will get his degree, and we can start a business with the banker Matthew. That's a great idea, Robert. James is a smart boy. He must have become close to her when we all lived in London." Sarah smiled with satisfaction, then frowned a little. "I just don't remember Ilona, Jane's mother, saying that her daughter was coming to visit. Maybe Jane wanted to surprise them too." "They do love surprises," Robert said with a satisfied grin. The prospect of having a banker as a relative suited him just fine. Soon the doorbell rang and the maid hurried to open it. James's parents peered into the hall with interest. Sarah's smile quickly vanished, and Robert scratched his head in confusion. When they saw their son's companion, Mary took off her simple puffer jacket and straightened her equally simple dress. She turned to face them, meeting Sarah's gaze. Mary flinched a little. James's mother's gaze was so unkind. "Mum, Dad," James said with a smile. "Meet Mary." "So it's Mary," Sarah sneered. "Come on in, Mary." Sarah turned away and walked to the dining table, sitting down in her chair. Robert greeted the girl anyway and invited her to the table. Mary felt out of place. There was so much luxury all around her, so much crystal and so many mirrors. She had forgotten that people could live like this. Everyone started eating in silence. James tried to get his parents to talk, but they only replied in monosyllables. They didn't even look at their guest. James gave Mary an encouraging wink, but she didn't feel any better. Finally, Sarah looked at the girl. "I wonder how this simpleton will handle this dish." It was true. Mary had forgotten how to eat such seafood with proper etiquette. Her mother had taught her as a child, but that was so long ago. In the children's home and at her guardian's house in the village, they didn't have such dishes. Salted sprat, or at best codfish. That was all the seafood they had. James, understanding Mary's confusion, quickly told her what to do and helped her. Sarah watched the efforts of this brazen girl who dared to come into their house with a smirk. "So, tell us about yourself, Mary," Sarah finally said. "It's very interesting to know who your parents are, where you live, and study." "Mum," James said for her, "what's with all the questions? I just invited Mary for dinner. Let's save all the conversations for another time." "Why?" Sarah objected. "We need to know who we are letting into our own home. What if our silver spoons go missing later?" "Don't worry." Mary's voice trembled with hurt, and tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm not like that, and I won't take anything from you. I'm a student at a fashion design school, and I live in a dormitory. My parents died when I was 5, and I grew up in a children's home." "In a children's home?" Sarah gasped. "Were your parents alcoholics?" "My dad was a businessman," Mary replied. "We lived in a big, beautiful house, but after my parents died, everything was taken for debts." "So your father was a crook," Robert said, adding his 2 pence, forgetting about his diplomatic skills. He suddenly wanted to become related to the banker, and here was some Mary. "Dad," James snapped, "that's too much. How can you say that about a man you don't even know?" "We're in our own home, and we'll say what we want," Sarah said for her husband. "I never thought I would have dinner with a student from a fashion design school." "My son, you've surprised me." Mary got up from the table and ran to the hall. The girl was crying from the humiliation she had never experienced before. So much contempt in James's parents' eyes, so much mockery. And why? Because she was poor. James ran after her. His parents, as if nothing had happened, continued their meal. He caught up with Mary at the gate of their mansion, pulled her into his arms, and tried to comfort her. "Why? Why did you invite me here?" she kept repeating. "You said your parents were good people. They're not." "I don't know why they were like that," James said in his defense. "I never would have thought. I thought they always understood and supported me. They've never once told me who I could be friends with, and then this." "But you've never brought a poor girl home before?" Mary said bitterly. "Don't say that." "But it's the truth," Mary said. James couldn't find a reply. He simply put her in the car and took her to her dormitory. He stayed with her until morning. The young man comforted the girl, swore his love for her, and promised that no obstacles would keep them from being together. And Mary believed him. It was their first night of love. Before this, they had only had a romantic relationship. "Do you regret anything?" James whispered, hugging his love. "I don't," she replied. "The most important thing is that we love each other, and everything else will work itself out." "Of course it will," James smiled. "You'll see, my parents will be dancing at our wedding." "Our wedding?" Mary's heart fluttered with joy. "Of course," James said with a smile. "We're together, and it's forever. But first, let me finish university and you finish your school, and then we'll get married. I'll be a doctor, and you'll be the most famous fashion designer in the city. Or no, you'll just be my wife, and you'll stay home and raise our children. I want a boy and a girl." "Me too," Mary admitted shyly. And they continued to dream about the future until dawn. Then they fell asleep in each other's arms. They celebrated New Year's Eve together in James's flat, and they didn't need anyone else. They had their own small universe. After the holidays, Mary moved in with James. She tried not to think about what his parents would say. Somewhere deep down, she was convinced they would accept her. Her intuition told her that such a simple boy couldn't have such arrogant parents. James had also messed up. He had wanted to surprise them, but he should have told them a little bit about Mary first. No, they would definitely accept their son's choice. A few more months passed. Mary had already graduated from her school and had found a job at a tailoring factory. James was in his final year of university. Soon he would be a certified specialist. During this time, Mary never doubted his sincerity. Yes, he loved her, a simple tailor. But James's parents never came to visit them and didn't invite them over either. Mary believed the ice would eventually break. It was a warm July evening. Mary was humming a nursery rhyme while she cooked dinner. James had gone to meet with some friends from university and promised to be home a bit later. Mary wasn't worried at all. It was normal for her love to want to hang out with friends sometimes. The doorbell rang. Mary raised her eyebrows in surprise. James was back so soon. She rushed to open it without even checking the peephole. The smile quickly slid from her face when she saw who it was. "Sarah," Mary said in confusion. "Hello. May I come in?" the woman asked briskly. Without waiting for an answer, she walked into the flat, almost bumping into Mary's shoulder. "Oh, yes," Mary said. "I'm sorry, this is so unexpected. Please come in. The pie is almost ready." "Pie?" Sarah said, scrunching up her nose. "No, I'm watching my diet, and I advise you to do the same, my dear, although in your case it's useless. You just eat whatever you can get," Sarah said with a sneer. "You won't keep my son with your pies or your figure. What do you think he's doing right now? He's with his friends." "With friend?" Sarah laughed, then suddenly grew serious and said in an icy tone, "He's with the woman he loves right now." "You're mistaken," Mary said. "I'm mistaken." "No, you're mistaken. You probably think you're my son's wife, so I'm in a hurry to tell you otherwise. He's a man. He needs to satisfy his needs. Forgive me for being so blunt, but that's the way it is. Jane came back a few days ago, and he's at a cafe with her right now. They're getting married in August." After saying all this, Sarah watched Mary with a triumphant smile. Mary's face turned pale and her lips began to tremble. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't believe you," she said in a shaky voice. "You don't? Well, see for yourself. They're at the Italian cafe in the city center right now. I can give you a ride." "No, thank you. Please leave," Mary said. "Leave? My dear, this flat was bought with my husband's money," Sarah said with a smirk. "I'm not kicking you out right now, but I hope you understand that you need to leave." Sarah walked to the door and waved goodbye. Mary sat in the flat for 5 more minutes, thinking about everything she had just heard. Could James have lied to her so maliciously? Was he just using her? She had to go to that cafe. Yes, Sarah was right. Mary ran out of the flat and a taxi just happened to be outside the building. Her heart pounding, Mary walked towards the cafe. She hoped until the last moment that everything Sarah had said was a lie. James couldn't do that to her. He loved her. But through the window, she saw him sitting at a table with an unknown woman. She was beautiful. There was no denying that. The woman was saying something to James and laughing, occasionally touching his arm. He was just listening and nodding. Mary decided they were just friends. Sarah had just told her a bunch of lies. She was about to leave, not wanting to draw attention to herself. The last thing she needed was for James to see her and ask questions. She didn't want him to get into a fight with his mother because of her again. But then, Mary saw the woman get up from her seat, walk behind James, put her arms around his shoulders, and kiss him. Mary didn't wait to see what happened next. She turned and ran away from the cafe. He had lied to her about everything, about his love, about meeting his friends, so he was a traitor. Oh God, how stupid she was. Mary walked down the street, tears blurring her vision. He had just used her. She even remembered her former friend Polly's words, who had told her that James would use her and leave her. How right she had been. But why did he do that to her? Maybe there was a huge gap between them. He was rich and she was poor. For him, she was just a toy. She didn't need anything from him. Where would she go now? A married couple was living in her room in the dormitory. Mary, out of the goodness of her heart, had let them stay there. She couldn't just throw them out in the middle of the night. She decided to spend the night in the factory's guardhouse, if the old guard, old John, would let her. The old man was very surprised, but he agreed. He even gave up his sofa and took a camp bed for himself. He didn't ask any questions and didn't interfere. In the morning, he woke her up early. "Get up, girl," he said. "I'll make you some breakfast. You have to go to work and my shift is ending." The old man unfolded a newspaper on the old table, sliced some sausage and bread, and brewed some tea. Eat, he said. I don't know what happened to you, but remember, my dear, never give up. Life is like a river. As soon as you give up, you'll sink to the bottom. Mary drank the tea and nodded at the old man, but she wasn't really listening. She had another thought on her mind. What if she saw James? How would she talk to him? The thought of how he had treated her hurt her deeply. If he said something hurtful to her, she wouldn't be able to handle it. No, and then her eyes fell on the newspaper. It was an ad paper in the job section. Mary suddenly read an ad about a factory in another city that was looking for tailors. Housing would be provided. She made a split-second decision. She would go there. Nothing was keeping her here. Thank you, Grandpa, for the tea and the place to sleep, she told the guard and ran to the factory manager to get her paperwork. That was it. She was quitting and leaving this city that had brought her so much misfortune. She was on a train in a carriage, on her way to the city that needed tailors so badly. The management was surprised and didn't want to let her go, but Mary insisted. Her roommates in her old room were happy. Mary only asked them to look after her room and pay the utilities. She was starting life with a blank slate. A day later, she was at the factory. The management was very happy to see her. Mary realized that everything had looked so bright only in the ad. In reality, the pay was very low, but at least the housing was free. What kind of housing was it anyway? A bunk in a 4-person room, almost like her room in the children's home. But this time, her roommates weren't just girls like her. They were women who had been beaten down by life. Hannah had just been released from prison. Natasha had come to earn some money and had left her 3 children in the village. And Zara loved to drink. Men are scoundrels, Mary, she would lecture the girl. Don't ever trust them. They'll always betray you. Mary would just nod in response. She already knew that herself. Here at the factory, Mary was doing what she was used to, sewing bed linens and robes. The work was simple, but there was a lot of it, and by evening, her eyes would get dark from exhaustion. Her head was often dizzy, and she would feel nauseous in the mornings. Her roommates quickly realized what was happening. You're pregnant, Zara said with authority. Don't put it off, go to the doctor. Otherwise, you'll end up like me, raising these leeches. Zara, are you saying you put it off with all 3 of your kids? Hannah asked with a laugh. Well, you were a bit flustered the first time, but what stopped you after that, when you're telling Mary to go to the doctor? Well, I did, Zara snapped. I put it off with all 3 right up until the end. I thought their fathers would marry me. Did they marry you? No, Natasha answered for her. They're men. Natasha looked at Mary. Don't listen to Zara. Get the baby. Otherwise, you'll end up like me, empty after an abortion, and 2 husbands left me. Maybe I'm not pregnant yet, Mary said in confusion. Maybe I'm just sick from exhaustion. You're sick from a man, Zara replied. Natasha and Hannah laughed loudly. But at the clinic, the doctor confirmed that she was pregnant, 5 or 6 weeks along. The tired doctor asked monotonously if Mary would keep the baby and reached for the abortion papers. I'll keep it, Mary said in a panic. The doctor nodded in approval. Yes, Mary didn't hesitate for a second. She would keep the baby and raise it herself, and she would never ask James for anything. He wouldn't even know anything. When the factory found out she was pregnant, they weren't too happy. The management immediately said that Mary wouldn't get any benefits because she wasn't officially employed. Mary was indignant. What do you mean, not officially? I gave my employment record to Human Resources and signed a contract. But she didn't have any papers, so she couldn't prove she was officially employed. But Mary decided to work until her maternity leave, and then she would see. Going back to her hometown wasn't a good idea either. No one would hire her there with a big belly. She would work as long as she could. In the end, she would get some benefits for unemployed people. She had checked. The pregnancy was easy. Mary regularly went to the clinic and followed all the doctor's orders. At 7 months, she was sent on maternity leave, but she continued to work. The doctor scolded her, but what else could Mary do? She had no one else to rely on. She saved money from her salary to buy a cot and some essential things for her little girl. A little girl? Yes, Mary was going to have a daughter. As she fell asleep, she would whisper, stroking her belly, "My little girl, everything will be fine with us. Mum will handle it." And the baby, as if understanding her mother, would gently kick her from the inside with her tiny foot. Her roommates, to her surprise, took the news of a new resident seriously. Natasha had barely had a drink. Hannah had even brought some of her children's clothes from the village. And Zara kept telling Mary, "We'll get through this, friend. Don't you worry." Mary was grateful to them for everything. "Girls, I'll pay you all back," she said. "When I start working, I'll pay you back." "You'll pay us back," Zara laughed. "But right now, you need to raise your little one." "Zara, I know it's hard for you," Mary said. "You have your own kids, and you're helping me." "Who else is going to help you, you fool?" Zara would reply. At 3 months, during a checkup at the clinic, the doctors suddenly suspected that her daughter Daisy had a serious illness. "Your child has a congenital heart defect," the doctors said. "She'll need very expensive surgery in the future. We advise you to start looking into it now." "How much does it cost?" Mary asked with fear. The doctors gave her an estimated sum. Mary felt dizzy from what she heard. Where would she get that kind of money? "You still have a few years," the doctors reassured her, "but we advise you not to wait. There are special foundations that help raise money. Try to contact them." But the question of the operation took a back seat when a distraught Mary returned to the factory with her baby. The guard at the gate called her and told her to go see the superintendent. "So, Morozova?" the thick-set superintendent said in a cold voice. "The factory called? It turns out you're living here, but you're not working." "Where am I supposed to work? I have a 3-month-old baby with me," Mary replied. "I don't know," Zinaida said, shaking her head. "Only those who work or are officially employed can live here." "Are you officially employed?" "I gave my employment record to Human Resources," Mary said, a bit defiantly. "Well, here it is," Zinaida said, pulling a thin book from her desk drawer. "They gave this to me. There's no record of you working at our factory. So, my dear, I'm asking you to vacate your bunk today." "Where am I supposed to go with a newborn?" Mary cried. "I don't care about that, and you can stop your crying. It won't work on me," Zinaida said. "You're free to go." The superintendent pointed to the door. Mary left her office in tears. What was she going to do now? Her daughter, sensing her mother's distress, started whimpering. "Hush, my love, hush," Mary whispered, her own tears streaming down her face. In the evening, her roommates came. They were already aware of the situation. Hannah had even gone to the director and argued with him. But it was no use. Mary and her 3-month-old baby were being kicked out onto the street. "Girls, I'm going to go to my hometown," Mary finally said. "After all, I have a flat from the state. For now, there are people living there, but I have no choice. I'll have to apologize to them." "How are you going to live there alone?" Zara said, horrified. "At least here, we can help you." "I'll manage," Mary said. "Besides, I have to go there anyway to get my benefits." "Oh, forget about it," Zara said, waving her hand. "But you're a fool. Who's going to help you there?" They talked for a long time about how they would get her there, and how they would get all her things out. They decided that Hannah would help Mary and her daughter get there, and then all together they would figure out how to solve Daisy's health problem. "We'll get through it, friend," Hannah said with a wink. Mary smiled sadly. "We'll get through it." No one was waiting for her in her hometown. Luckily, the people who were living in Mary's flat had recently moved out. It was empty and in poor condition. Mary was even happy about it. At least, she wouldn't have to explain anything to anyone. But it turned out that the residents had left a lot of unpaid utility bills. Now Mary had to deal with all of it. Hannah stayed in the city until Mary got all the benefits for Daisy sorted out, then left, telling her to call her and not to lose touch, that they would definitely call her too. The first benefit payment for Daisy went to paying off the utility debt. There was almost no money left for food. It was awful for Mary to remember how she had lived that month. But she didn't ask anyone for help. She was too ashamed to contact her former roommates. She managed on her own. She didn't even think about finding James. Why would she? If he wanted to, he would have found her long ago. She wasn't important to him. He had played with her and thrown her away. Sometimes, while walking with her daughter, she would think with fear, what if we run into him? How will he act? But James was nowhere to be seen. Maybe he wasn't even living here anymore. Mary didn't try to find out anything about him. She had other worries, and they all revolved around her daughter. One day, Mary ran into another person from her past. Outside a shop, a group of people were standing around. 2 men who looked like vagrants and a disheveled woman. The men were saying something and slapping the woman's bottom, and she was laughing happily. Suddenly she saw Mary, and her eyes widened. "Mary!" the woman shouted. "My God, is that you?" Mary stopped and couldn't believe her eyes. It was Polly, dirty, in scruffy clothes, and wearing a lot of makeup. She reeked of alcohol. "My dear friend," Polly said, swaying, and took a step towards Mary. Mary recoiled with the pram. "Are you too good for me?" Polly sneered. "Well, look at you. You're a little snob. I see you're with a kid. Did your James leave you?" "Why do you think that?" Mary asked calmly. "I can see you're a single mum. Look at your cheap pram. You're barely dressed." At this comment, Mary smiled a little. Look who's talking, she thought, but decided not to escalate the situation. "Where do you live?" she asked, changing the subject. "I don't see you at the dormitory." "I sold my room," Polly replied, tossing her head. "I'm a free woman. I do what I want and live with whoever I want, wherever I want. I invested the money in a business." "Right," Mary nodded. She understood that her former friend was lying. "What business?" "She probably drank all the money away." "Oh, Mary," Polly said, shaking her head. "I told you that James didn't want you, but you didn't listen. And now you're raising a kid on your own." Mary didn't reply. She nodded goodbye and walked on with her daughter. Behind her, she could hear Polly's laughter and the guffawing of her companions. Mary walked and wondered what had happened to Polly. They hadn't seen each other for less than 2 years, and look at the changes. It seemed the saying about genetics was true. Her mother was an alcoholic, and she had gone down the same path. Mary didn't take her former friend's words to heart. Why be offended by someone who was destroying their own life and rejoicing in the problems of others? She never saw Polly again. Time went on. Mary learned to live on her own with her daughter. Hannah, Natasha, and Zara would call her and sometimes even visit. Their support, even moral support, helped the young single mother to not lose hope. But she had to solve all her problems alone. Over time, Mary found another source of income. She started sewing at home. She bought an old sewing machine and some fabrics and began taking her first orders from the dormitory residents. Soon, other residents in the neighborhood learned about the skilled seamstress. She had a stable income, but it was still not enough to solve her main problem, her daughter's health. Daisy's health problems were getting worse. Sometimes she would gasp for air, her lips would turn blue, she would grab her chest and cry, "It hurts, Mom, it hurts." Mary would cry from her helplessness. She couldn't do anything to help her daughter. The doctors all said the same thing. She needed an operation, otherwise the problem would only get worse every year. One day, her little heart might just give up. Mary contacted the foundations again. She and her daughter had been on their lists all this time, but there had been no help. And Mary didn't have the time to go and fight for it. She had to survive in this world and work. She was torn between visiting the foundations and sewing endlessly. Her daughter didn't go to kindergarten because of her poor health, so she was always with her. "What do you expect?" they would say at the foundations. "We have put your information everywhere we can, but there are children who need the money more. Your daughter is growing and developing, but there are babies who can't even breathe on their own. They get the money first." "But my daughter is also sick," Mary would cry. "We understand, and we're doing everything we can. You should look for sponsors. Maybe someone will respond." "What sponsors?" she would think. Hannah and Natasha? They live on pennies themselves. They called and visited sometimes. The women had created a support group in their city, and Mary had created a group for Daisy's treatment online, but there was no progress there either. People would either send her a few pennies or scold her with unkind words. And she couldn't count on a free operation. For some reason, other children who apparently needed more help always came first. 6 years passed like this. Soon, Daisy would go to school, and Mary understood that it would be a serious challenge for her daughter. What if her heart couldn't take it? At night, Mary would cry from her despair. Sometimes she would think about James. Maybe she should find him and tell him about their daughter and her trouble. After all, he was her father and a doctor. But then she realized that it would not end well. If he wanted to, he would have found her long ago. He didn't need her. He had played with her and thrown her away. They were too different, and this realization only made Mary feel worse. One evening, Mary suddenly realized they were out of milk and bread. The nearby shop was open until 8 p.m. Without thinking, she grabbed Daisy and ran out to get the groceries. The shop was in the next building. She would make it. But just as they were about to go in, Daisy suddenly started whimpering and pointed to the square nearby. There was a playground there. "I want to play in the sandbox, Hanmatamau," her daughter whined. "Daisy, let's run to the shop first and then we'll go to the playground," Mary said, but her daughter suddenly started crying bitterly. She wanted to go to the playground, and that was it. She was usually not a difficult child, but now she was screaming and pulling away. "Daisy, you can't get stressed out." Mary tried to calm her, but it was no use. At that moment, other mothers who knew Mary saw them and offered to watch the girl for her. "Oh, thank you so much," Mary said happily. "I'll be back in 2 seconds. Don't worry, Daisy is a calm child. I don't know what's gotten into her, and she can't get stressed out." "Mary, don't worry," one of the mums said with a smile. "Run to the shop and we'll go to the sandbox." She took the little girl's hand, and Daisy immediately calmed down, understanding that she had won. In the shop, even though it was almost closing time, it was still quite crowded. 5 people were in the queue in front of Mary. The young mum wasn't worried. Daisy knew the neighbors and their children and would have a good time playing while she was gone. But on the playground, a drama was unfolding. Daisy walked up to the sandbox, knelt to pick up a toy bucket, but suddenly fell sideways and began to gasp for air. Her face turned blue, and she started having convulsions. The mothers froze in terror. No one knew what to do. "An ambulance! We need a doctor!" one of them finally screamed, and ran to get her mobile phone. The other women fussed around the little girl, but no one could do anything. It seemed the girl had stopped breathing, and then an unknown man ran up to them. "I'm a doctor," he said briefly. "Move aside." The man quickly assessed the situation. Every second counted. He gave Daisy mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. No one had even had time to wash their hands. The girl seemed to be breathing again. "Where is her mother?" the man asked. "She's at the shop," the women replied in confusion. "The ambulance might not make it in time." "The child needs immediate hospitalization," the man said quickly, and picked Daisy up in his arms. "Where are you taking her?" the women asked, indignant. "Stop him! I'm a doctor, I'm telling you again," he said. "And there's no time to wait for the mother to finish her stroll through the shops. Here's the address where she can meet us." The man shoved a business card with the address and phone number of his clinic into one of the women's hands and practically ran to his silver foreign car with the child in his arms. Daisy was breathing, but with difficulty, with a gasp. None of the mums even had time to react. They all looked at each other in confusion. What were they going to tell Mary? "Who took her and where?" Mary screamed when she returned to the playground 5 minutes later. "How could you let that happen?" "Mary, Daisy suddenly got very sick," one of them said. He said that every second counted. Mary knew that something extraordinary had happened. But you can't just hand over your child to an unknown person. They were just confused by the man's pressure and his determination. "Here's his card," one of them mumbled, and shoved the piece of paper into Mary's hand. Mary read the address and started looking for a taxi. She called the police and told them her child had been kidnapped. In the taxi, she finally let herself cry. "My daughter, my darling, where are you? How could a few minutes turn our whole lives upside down? What if something happens to Daisy?" Mary knew she wouldn't be able to handle it. At the address she had been given, there was a private clinic for cardiovascular diseases. Mary ran to the reception desk and breathlessly explained who she was and why she was there. "Calm down, madam," a pretty receptionist said to her. "Everything is fine. Your child is indeed here. The chief physician is with her now, and they are preparing her for an operation." "What operation?" Mary cried out. "A heart operation. I believe your daughter had a heart attack. It's a good thing our doctor was nearby." "An operation?" Mary couldn't believe it. "I've been trying to get this operation since my daughter was born. It's so expensive. No one would take her without money. I have nothing to pay you with." "Are you thinking about your daughter's life or money?" the receptionist asked, strictly frowning. "My God, my daughter, of course. It's just so unexpected." "Wait in the hall," the girl said, smiling now. "And believe me, if James is operating on your daughter, everything will be fine, and I'm sure the money issue will be resolved." James. That name confused Mary a little, but she immediately forgot about it. There must be many surgeons with the same name. The operation lasted for several hours. During that time, the police arrived at the clinic. When they found out the child was in the hospital and was being taken care of by doctors, they left. but not before lecturing Mary. "Madam, you should take better care of your child." Mary didn't care. Yes, it was her fault. But she had only left her daughter for a few minutes with people she knew. And look what happened. The most important thing was that everything turned out all right. Finally, the doors to the operating theatre opened, and a doctor walked into the hall. When Mary saw him, she froze. It was James. Her James. He also recognized her and paused for a second, then practically ran towards her, forgetting about the hours of surgery. "James?" Mary whispered and fainted. She woke up in James's office. She was lying on a couch and he was sitting beside her, looking at her. "How is my daughter?" she said with difficulty. "The girl is fine. I did an emergency heart operation on her. She'll need another one, but that can wait. I understand the girl has a serious heart defect. Why wasn't she operated on sooner? They said it could be done later, and it was very expensive." "Expensive?" James sighed. "Oh, those bureaucrats. Never mind. Don't worry. Your daughter will be treated at my clinic completely free of charge. I just need her documents. I don't even know the baby's name. Her name is Daisy. She's my daughter." Hearing this, James's face changed. He was stunned. "Mary," he said with a sob, "you disappeared so suddenly all these years. I looked for you. What was I supposed to do when your mum told me you were going to marry another woman?" "That's not true," he said. "I only had you." "Don't lie to me," Mary cried. "I saw you at the cafe with another woman." She told him about how she had seen him with another woman so many years ago. James listened, his face growing darker and darker. "I don't understand why Jane showed up so suddenly. She asked me to meet her." "Yes, I lied to you and told you I was meeting friends so you wouldn't be offended. Jane called and begged me to meet her, then she started kissing me in the cafe. Mary, I never had anything with her, not before you, not after. When I lived with you, I only loved you, and I still do. As for Jane, I understand now that my mum set up the whole thing. She and my dad wanted me to marry Jane so badly." "So you got married?" Mary said. "No, Mary, I'm telling you again. I have loved you all these years, and I still do." They looked at each other, and then they hugged. They just sat there, hugging and in silence. How could they have parted ways because of someone else's intrigues? Two loving hearts had been separated, and then fate had brought them together again. James told her that after Mary had disappeared, he had looked for her for a long time. He had gone to her dormitory and her workplace, but no one could tell him anything. Mary had vanished into thin air. He had seen Polly at the dormitory back then. When he told her Mary was missing, she had just giggled and said, "The little bird has flown away." After graduating from university, James went abroad, where he worked as a surgeon. Only a few months ago, he returned to England and to his clinic, which had been open for a couple of years. He had never married. His relationship with his parents was very tense after he refused to marry the banker's daughter. They had been so offended. It turned out they had already arranged everything with the banker's family and were making plans together. But their son had put his foot down. After returning to his hometown, James continued to look for Mary. She wasn't on social media, and she wasn't at her old workplace. With his busy schedule, James couldn't go to the village where Mary used to live. And then, that evening, he had a free minute. So he drove to the area where she lived and walked to the dormitory, thinking about his love. Suddenly, he saw a little girl on the playground who needed immediate medical attention. Forgetting about everything, he ran to save the child, and he did. "My God, I operated on my own daughter and didn't even know it," James exclaimed and sighed heavily. "Who would have thought this could happen? I never would have believed it. I have a daughter. "I'm so grateful you were there," Mary confessed. "I'm afraid to imagine what would have happened if you had arrived just a little later. Mary, I don't believe in miracles because of my profession, but today I'm ready to believe in it with all my heart," he said. "Yes, it must be a miracle. Our daughter has a powerful guardian angel." They sat and talked for a long time, remembering the past. Mary talked about Daisy, and James listened to her every word. It was a bit strange that their lives had crossed paths in such an amazing way, but it was true. Then they went together to visit Daisy. The girl had already woken up from the anesthetic. "Mum," the girl whispered, "I fell, and I don't remember anything else. Am I going to die now?" "What are you talking about, my love?" Mary said, smiling through her tears. "You're going to live a long and happy life. You'll just have to stay in the hospital for a little while, and then you'll be the healthiest girl ever." "And I'll go to school?" "Of course," James nodded. As a doctor, I'm telling you, you'll study just like everyone else and even better. James asked Mary not to tell the girl who he was right away. For Daisy, he was just a doctor for now. It was better for the girl's health to not have too many strong emotions. A month later, Daisy had another operation. This time, another doctor, a specialist in the pathology her daughter had, operated on her. James had flown him in from Israel. Soon the girl was on the road to recovery. From the clinic, Daisy and her mum went to a beautiful new house. The girl couldn't believe she was going to live there now. "Mum, there's even a separate kitchen here," she whispered, looking at the kitchen with delight. They had been living in a dormitory with a shared kitchen and bathroom. "Yes, my dear," Mary smiled. "And it's all yours," James said. "The kitchen, the bathroom, and you have your own room. And we have a garden." "Why is it mine?" the girl asked. James faltered a bit. They still hadn't told Daisy who he was. But the time had come. "Because this house is mine. And I'm your dad," he finally said. Daisy, a 6-year-old, frowned, looked at Mary and said, "Mum, is this true?" "Yes, my love," Mary said, tears in her eyes. "He is your dad." "My dad!" the girl exclaimed happily and ran to him to give him a hug. She had her own dad now, just like all the other children. It was a little difficult for James and Mary to get used to the fact that they were a family now, and it took a while for them to get used to all the love and happiness. A year later, Mary and James got married. Her 3 friends, Hannah, Natasha, and Zara, who had supported her through everything, were there. "Oh, Mary, you look so beautiful," Zara said, looking at Mary in her wedding dress. "I've always dreamed of this, but I've never been in a white dress. My daughter is getting married soon, and I've never been a bride." "Zara, my dear," Mary laughed. Even though her friend was 15 years older, they always talked like equals. "I'm sure it will happen for you one day." "Of course it will," Natasha laughed. "I can say, looking at Mary, that not all men are scoundrels. Look at James. He's a good man." "Yes," Hannah scoffed, "as long as he's not an endangered species." All 4 of them laughed. Then came the ceremony, followed by the reception. The friends took turns watching Daisy while Mary and James had their wedding photos taken, received congratulations, and danced. But mostly, the little girl was with her parents. Daisy was so happy that her mum was married and that she had a dad, just like other children. How wonderful it was, and her heart no longer hurt. What happiness! James's parents were not at the wedding. Their son had deliberately not invited them, even though they were in England. Sarah, finding out whom her son was marrying, had a tantrum. "James is ruining his life," she said. "She's a mongrel, and who knows who she had a child with. And Mary will show her true colors eventually. Jane is such a good girl. It's true she was married before, but she's divorced now." "Mum, don't you ever dare to interfere in my life again," James replied. "If it wasn't for you, my Mary and my daughter wouldn't have had to go through all of this. Daisy would have had the operation sooner and wouldn't have suffered so much. You call Mary a mongrel? She's not. She has never hurt anyone with her words or actions. Her behavior is always noble. But what about you, Mum? How did you behave?" "How dare you speak to your mother like that?" his dad roared. "Watch what you say." "I don't want to talk to you anymore," James replied wearily. "Live your life. But don't you dare interfere in mine. I won't allow it." They had a huge fight. James was a bit upset that his parents had behaved so disgracefully towards the woman he loved, but he knew there was no point in trying to change their minds, so they stopped talking. 6 months passed. James was still working at his clinic. Mary was at home, taking care of their daughter and the house. They had a housekeeper, but Mary did a lot of things herself. She didn't like strangers to do her laundry or clean their bedroom. She loved working in the garden and planted a huge bed of roses. And now, they had a little Samoyed puppy, just like she had when she was a child. Mary named him Snowy. Daisy loved playing with him, and Mary did too. Sometimes she would sit down at her sewing machine and make something. A dress for Daisy or a dress for herself. Once, she made a shirt for James. When he tried on his new shirt, he couldn't believe that his wife was so skilled with a sewing machine. He had bought her the one she asked for, but he never imagined that his love had such a talent. "Mary, I can't even tell the difference between your shirt and a branded one," he said, admiring the shirt. "That's just the tailor I am," Mary said with a modest smile. "You know, I miss working. I'm not used to sitting at home." Maybe I can find a job. My wife, the chief physician's wife, is going to go to a factory and sew bed linens. James smiled. No way. You know what I'm thinking? We don't have a lot of money right now because we put everything into the clinic, but in a year, the situation should change. Then I can buy you a small studio where you can be the boss and a seamstress. How does that idea sound? James, I've dreamed of that for a long time, Mary exclaimed. Having my own studio, it's so wonderful. She laughed and hung around her husband's neck. But soon, news came that changed their plans. One day, Mary's mobile phone rang. Mary Morozova? A stern male voice asked. Hello, Mary said in confusion. I'm a notary. I have an important message for you. Hello, Mary replied. But my name isn't Morozova anymore. What is it about? Could you please come to my office with all your identity documents? The notary asked. And I'll explain everything to you then. Don't worry, it's very good news. You're making it sound so mysterious. You're scaring me. No, I didn't mean to. I'm waiting for you, the notary said, and gave her his address. Mary couldn't tell if it was a joke or for real. Daisy was at school and James was at work. She had done all her chores and lunch was ready. Maybe she should go and see what the important message was. And so she did. She called a taxi and went to the notary's office. A pleasant-looking man in his middle age, Peter, greeted her. He was the one who had called her. He told Mary that she was the heir to a firm's assets. Heir? Mary said in surprise. Where? I don't have anyone. My parents died when I was little. You must have the wrong person. I checked everything several times, Peter said, shaking his head. There's no mistake. He explained that about a year ago, a major businessman was arrested. They started investigating his crimes and found another one that had happened more than 20 years ago. This businessman, whose name was Alex, was the manager of a company that belonged to her father, George Morozov. Alex had been breaking the law back then too. He was sending money to shell companies and creating fake firms. At some point, George found out and just wanted to fire him without making a big deal out of it. He felt sorry for him, but Alex didn't feel sorry for him. He arranged the car crash that killed Mary's parents. Mary was the only survivor by a miracle. Then Alex took over her father's firm and all his assets. How do you know this? Mary asked, tears in her eyes. It was so hard for her to hear all this and even harder to remember the accident itself. The investigators found out everything, Peter said. Alex confessed to everything himself. A huge amount of work was done. And now you are the legal heir to all the assets that this manager took from your father. Just like that? What do I have to do? Mary asked, still trying to grasp what she had heard. Nothing, he said. You just have to take your legal rights. That's why I looked for you. And I have to say, it wasn't easy. I had to visit 2 children's homes, I went to the village and then to all the factories. I looked everywhere for you, and it turns out you were right here all this time. Yes, it's a strange coincidence, Mary said with a smile. Then she remembered. How are my former guardians doing? They're gone, Peter said. They drank themselves to death. Mary just sighed. She hadn't been to that village since her youth. There was nothing for her there, especially since James' grandmother, old Mrs. Thompson, had passed away while she was still in school. Those were the days. That evening, she told her husband everything. At first, James didn't believe the story either. He thought someone was trying to fool his wife. But after he looked at all the documents from the notary, he agreed. Everything seemed to be true. A little later, Mary took her inheritance, but she had no desire to work at a firm that had anything to do with computer technology. It was too complicated and uninteresting for her. So Mary decided to sell her assets. The other partners were happy about that. After receiving a huge sum of money, Mary was at a loss. What was she supposed to do with all this money? She decided to give most of it to her husband to develop his clinic. But James suddenly refused. No way, he said. I'm not taking money from a woman, not even my wife. Mary, have you forgotten your dream of having your own studio? You have enough money for a whole network of them. I haven't forgotten, of course, she said. But when it's just a dream, you feel braver. But when you have to make a decision, it's scary. I'm at a loss. I don't know if I can do it. Of course you can, he said. Oh, there's so much to do. I don't even know where to begin. Don't worry, James laughed. There are people who specialize in helping people start a business and handle all the organizational stuff. I'll find them, and you can start thinking about the details. For example, have you thought about who you'll hire? I haven't thought about anything yet, but I'll probably call the girls Zara, Natasha, and Hannah. They're excellent seamstresses. I think that's the right decision, James nodded. With friends like that, you won't have to worry about a crisis. And soon her friends came to Mary. She had them get settled in the city and found flats for them. The women were a little confused. Maybe they shouldn't have gotten involved in this. But when the network of studios started working and the first orders came in, it was clear that they would succeed. A year later, the Lightning network of studios was thriving. Mary came up with the name herself. Natasha, Zara, Hannah, and even James were confused. I would understand if you named the studio after yourself or your daughter or your late mom or dad or even Snowy, your dog, Hannah said. But why Lightning? Do you know what I used to think about when I lived in that village with my guardians who tormented me? She asked. I dreamed that one day lightning would strike and everything would sparkle and a new life would begin. And it did. I'm sure all the bad stuff is behind me now. Now I only have people in my life to whom I can give joy and who give me joy, something like that. And Lightning continued to grow. The employees were well paid and Mary's friends were even able to buy flats. Zara moved her children to the city and even got married. Natasha also found a decent man and no longer said that there were no good men left. It turns out there are. Only Hannah was alone. Well, not alone. The woman decided to take a girl from a children's home. She met a little girl and took her to her place for the weekends. She was preparing the documents. Yes, she would succeed. Soon, rich people started coming to the studio. Everyone wanted to have an outfit made by Mary. The young woman was invited to various TV shows, and she gave interviews. Mary would always agree to them despite her busy schedule. She always made time for her daughter and husband because, as always, family came first for her. One day, her mother-in-law Sarah called her. Sarah? Mary said in surprise. Hello, my dear Mary, her mother-in-law said in a sweet voice. I read about your work in a magazine. You're so good, and the photos are so nice. We haven't seen James in a long time. And your granddaughter. She's so beautiful. How old is she now? She's almost 10. Oh my, and she hasn't met her grandmother and grandfather yet? Mary, please invite us over. Robert and I want so much to talk to you and forget all our past differences. We're family. Yes, Sarah, you're right. We're family. But I'll ask James when we can have you over, all right? All right, all right. To be honest, James was happy that his parents had taken the first step. It hurt him that they didn't want to talk. And now they had asked to come over themselves. Of course, they invited Sarah and Robert over for dinner. There were lobsters on the table. Sarah didn't even flinch, as if she didn't remember the winter evening so many years ago when she mocked Mary's lack of skills. Now Mary handled the cutlery with ease, and so did Daisy. Sarah looked at her granddaughter and noted how much she resembled James as a child. Maybe she had been wrong, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. She just smiled. Daisy smiled back. She couldn't understand where her grandpa and grandma had been for so long. We're very busy, my dear, Sarah sighed. Grandpa travels all over the world. But if you want, we'll take you with us sometime. No, that's not likely, Mary smiled. Daisy has a lot to do here. She goes to school, dancing class, and drawing lessons. What a well-rounded granddaughter we have, Robert said with pride. Good for you. Yes, I am, Daisy said without false modesty. I also love to read surgery books. Surgery? Sarah said in surprise. Everyone looked at Daisy in surprise, even the maid Hannah. This was news to them. Her parents didn't even know about this. Yes, surgery, Daisy said. I don't understand much yet. I just look at the pictures, but one day I'll understand everything. I want to be a doctor, just like my dad. What? Mary laughed. Why not a fashion designer, like your mum? Oh, Mom, Daisy said. I don't like to draw. Then why do you go to drawing class? Robert asked. Because there's a boy there I like very much, the girl admitted, and everyone laughed. After dinner, they saw the parents off, and Mary and James sat in the living room for a long time, talking. I wonder if we'll be able to have a relationship with Sarah and Robert this time, James said. He was hoping for it. Mary was still a bit doubtful. Only time will tell.